There's some serious play goes on in some really serious fields. Soft skills, have we give it a title of play that really doesn't fit what it actually is? I don't want to change the word play, but ultimately it can mean so many different things, and maybe we just need to make sure that we always give a subheading to what we mean by play.
Shahneila went into this when she was talking about the Just Dance with the Algorithm project, which I thought was really cool, because they were doing Just Dance and they were talking about how you can teach programming concepts through dance. How on earth does those two things connect?
If you put too much parameters on, too many rules, and become too structured, how does anybody find out any new ones beyond the structure? How does anybody learn when you're experimenting? There's certain stuff you must adhere to. So if you put these two things together, it will blow something up. Do not do that. But everything else, actually, through discovery, we find our ability to test the edges of humanity and new things. Without that, we will never discover anything else.
The segue is tied into the fact that innovation has to happen, not just for the people that you think it's immediately going to help in schools and colleges. There's loads of other people that the technology can help. But the thing that I resonated with the first time I met Stephen, he's real passion about us dealing with the challenge that permanent exclusion brings to education.
There's some real data in terms of the likelihood of all those kind of things, and also the knock-on effect of society. The amount of investment it takes from somebody being excluded to not coming back in, and ultimately what the cost on society, rather than just being seen as bad kids and get them out. Well, actually, what is the impact for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and the cost per person of those decisions? Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. Today we have 7, 8, how many guests is it, Ben?
6, 7, 8.
6, 7. So we have 8, but we're not here. We've already done it. So it is our bi-monthly review where you can listen to just mine and Ben's dulcet tones. Dulcet tones, what is it? Is it a Dorset tone or is it a dulcet tone, Ben?
Dulcet.
Why is it dulcet? What's dulcet mean?
Dulcet means like soft in Latin. It means like, yeah, that's what that basically means.
I
like
thought I'd put it to you.
soothing.
You know, you are the expert of language, and ultimately I don't know.
I'm not the expert of language, but I like that
I don't know
word.
the difference between dulcet and fucking Dorset.
Dorset
is like the Cornish, isn't it? Like, is that right?
No. We're going to fall out with all the Cornwall people. Dorset is a totally different.
Only joking. But yes, that clearly shows how little understanding I have of the world. But yeah, you're going to be listening to me and Ben for the next half an hour. We're going to go through and we're going to share our best bits and just a bit of an overview. And remember, if you haven't watched any of these and you go, oh, that sounds really, really good, then you should go listen to each one. And you know what? If you haven't, why the fuck not? Why are you even
Very
here?
true.
If you're listening to
why are you?
Or if this is the first one, how random is it? You've just come across 2 random guys from the north of England. Go back and listen to 350 plus episodes that we have, not just these 8. Dive in, and if you have to, and you ain't got loads of time, well, just put us on 2x and get through them all. But I'm sure
if you can listen to us on 2x, then that is an achievement in and of itself, because I don't know if I could listen to myself on. Well, in fact, I can't. I listen to most podcasts on 1.7 speed, but I don't know if I could listen. Yeah, I don't know if I could listen to other people. I don't know if I can listen to myself that fast. I don't know I speak fast.
I'm going to review this by literally trying to listen to it on 2.
Bet you
and
don't.
Just see what I am going to, because ultimately it'll only take me 15 minutes. It's absolutely fine, mate. I'll be able to find that. I'll even do it on my next run. That's absolutely fine. But I'll be like, my head will be fried. Absolutely. So yeah.
By the way, I've just read a book just before we get into it. I've just read a book called The Island, and it's a Japanese translation book. And it was like, it's one of them things you should recommend reading. I'm telling you now, it is like ADHD in a book. There's no breaks, there's no paragraphs. It makes zero sense. It's just absolutely all. But it's great. It's a clever little book. But
I've got a new book.
Go on. Unreasonable Hospitality: The Field Guide.
So it's ultimately just to kind of go back to, because I love the book, and then I was just talking about it, and I was like, what does the way where I need to listen back? And I was like, no, I'm going to listen to it, and then I'm going to, there's like make your own definition of what hospitality is, and then what's it in context. So ultimately, it's about how leaders across any business can apply the unreasonable
that's
hospitality.
interesting.
And I was like, and it popped up on Amazon, and I was like, oh, brilliant. And it wasn't crazy expensive. So I was like, you know what? You know how tight I am, and I was like, I love that book. So I think I'm going to dive into that over the summer. That is my intention.
Nice.
So yeah, it should be good. Should be good. Should we dive in and start to explore at least one? Maybe.
Yeah, for sure. So, we have had a few podcasts over the last few weeks and months. Episode 348 is the first one, and the title of this one was "What are the blockers to true education transformation?" with Sara De Freitas. It's episode 348. If you want to go back and have a listen, and we interviewed Sarah. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong. Sarah at Brilliant Festival in Liverpool. And we knew that we were going to have a little conversation there, and that we extended that into in a full-on conversation. And she's doing some cool work, isn't she, with Waypoint? And it made, especially from a post compulsory education into that HE space, it really made me think: how do we navigate technology and the HE space, and how we rethink that?
Yeah, Sarah's doing a lot, or has done a lot of work in terms of what she would maybe describe and coin as immersive. Talked about virtual reality and everything else, but it was great to hear her experience and her longevity in higher education and research, but also UK context, but then Australian context, and then what does that look like for buildings evidence. I suppose the conversation, the most bits that I remember is actually it wasn't just about context of higher education and is it ready, and actually is it the most the best style of education. Now we're giving the best choice. We talk about they're doing great stuff, and we kind of pushed back and said, well, higher education isn't doing great stuff, is it? Often, but I think the conversation actually was around how we need to be led and research informed on any education technology conversation and decision, and linked it back to so lots of different things. There's definitely a growing noise groundswell around actually edtech that's bought compared to education technology that's actually making an impact. And how do you do that? How do you manage that? And how do you report that?
Yeah, and she also we had a lot of sentiment and alignment around this idea of the bloated curriculum, and it feels like there's a lot in all sectors, in all of the organisations that we're talking about, and it feels like FE and HE and secondary and primary, they're not necessarily having a through line, and that came through in the conversation that the standalone silos, the sectors, as opposed to thinking about an education system. And that ties into the idea that you bloat a curriculum and you think, all right, we need to cover this and we all need to do this. And we've said before that there's too much stuff in education. It feels like there's too much stuff, too much content to get through. There's too many exams. There's too much expectation on a curriculum, and perhaps the space and the joined up thinking, without using that cheesy phrase, that joined up thinking is possibly where we need to go as an organisation or as a sector, where we talk together rather than being in competition with each other.
Yeah, I think
so. Yeah. So, and episode 3, 4. So the next one was another person that we met at Brilliant. So thanks, Martin, for Martin Collins, and I know that you're a supporter of what we do as Edufuturists and always involved in stuff. So thank you for that. But another person that we met at Brilliant Festival that Martin organises. And by the way, if you aren't yet already booked into Brilliant in November, make sure that you are get your tickets. They are free. You can be in Liverpool in the end of middle of November. Is it 14th? Let me set the date. I was trying to do that as I was going. Can you remember it, Steve? What day it is?
I want to say 10th or 11th, but
it is a 10th. It's a 10th, Steve. It's a 10th of November. Get your tickets. Brilliant. Over to Brilliant. But the other person that we interviewed there that's in this run of podcasts is Shahneila Sayeed, and Shahneila is is involved in Schoolhouse and is involved in UK and doing some really cool stuff there around computing education and rethinking. One of my favourite conversations there was about when she talked about teaching computing without computers. That tickled me a little bit in terms of what she did. But the title that we gave that podcast was, "What if the lessons that look most like play are actually the more serious teaching and happening in your school. And that was what a provocation that Shahneila gave us, which was, and it again becomes a theme that if we were doing trends again, it feels like that theme of serious teaching and serious learning can happen whilst people are playing and are just discovering that learning. That came out a lot, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's one of the conversations that you kind of think, oh, that link really, they're all hyper connected, our conversations, through design or through just natural organic course. I think what's really key is that linked back to Sophie Pickles and so many different conversations around what does play even mean? As soon as you say the word, it has a connotation linking back to adults thinking, no, that's what it's for children. But really, actually, the conversation was, there is some serious play goes on in some really serious fields, engineering, and all those kind of things. And I just think ultimately, like soft skills, have we give it a title of play that really doesn't fit what it actually is? I don't want to change the word play, but ultimately it can mean so many different things. And maybe we just need to make sure that we always give a subheading to what we mean by play in the conversation and the context. So we say, when I say play, I mean this, rather than just play is everything. Because, you play football, but actually some real serious stuff in terms of sport. Play doesn't mean practice. And play actually means the informed element of the experience. And maybe we just call it experience, but then it gets caught into, I don't know how we define it better, but we need to be clear and make sure that people, and always counteract it when we say, I don't mean just messing about. I don't just mean messing about.
I really like where you've gone with that, because play can be unstructured. And that is okay. Discovery of, but you can actually, like the Maria Montessori conversation that we talk about, that prepared environment, it's play, but it's structured in a way that, and that's not like organized fun. There's a difference between that as well, because that's the worst thing ever. You're allowed to have 2 biscuits. The biscuits are lovely, but you can only have 2. My grandma used to talk about 1 plain, 1 fancy. You're only ever allowed 1 plain, 1 fancy biscuit. You used to have rules about how many biscuits you're allowed.
1 plain and 1 fancy?
That's what we're allowed. Now it depends what. Now, do you know what a plain?
What definition of a fancy is?
Well, that's it. Yeah, is a bourbon a fancy?
Oh, you see, this is the thing where
it is.
It's context and also application to whoever you're having a conversation with, because straight away you mention something, and it's the ability to tell a story and explain what you mean. Because and straight away I was like, wow, but actually your definition and your understanding is so different to mine.
Yeah, and that's what's really important in terms of the play thing. And I think Shahneila went into this when she was talking about the example that she talked about was at Schoolhouse. They did the Just Dance with the algorithm project, which I thought was really cool, because they were doing Just Dance and they were talking about how you can teach programming concepts through dance. Like, that sounds like, how on earth does those two things connect? But they do, and you can make those things. And one thing that I got from that brilliant conversation with Shahneila was that we don't have to play with rules all the time. But you need to understand that and be able to explain the rules of the game. So where you're talking about there, if we're playing chess and we're going, right, I want to move that piece there, you go, well, no, because you can't. This afternoon, I've just played paddle with my wife, Amanda, for the first time. She'd never played before. And I'm trying to explain to her the rules. And she's like, well, that sounds like a stupid rule. I'm like, yeah, but that is the rule. Like, it can hit the fence. It can bounce and hit the fence, but not off the serve. Well, that's stupid. No, it's not, because if I didn't, I just hit it straight across and you would never be able to get to it. And so the rule, you've got to play within the rules, haven't you? So you can have fun, you can practice cool shots, but you've got to do it within the rules. Same with the game of chess, same with computing. And that example that I was talking about earlier, about Shahneila talking about one of her first lessons in computing teaching being one where they had no actual physical computers. How do you teach computational thinking? And how do you teach computing without any physical computers? Imagine if we did that to teachers nowadays. Like, you can teach whatever you want to teach, but you can't use PowerPoint. It'd be chaos. It'd be absolute chaos. There'd be mutiny.
I think that I don't want to keep saying it because literally people say, you always say this, but don't it just go back to agency with guardrails? Don't it just go back to that?
It does. Absolutely.
Literally, it's like, it's just, you can do anything, but actually there's a few rules and clear boundaries in regards to that context. It's just that, isn't it? Like, literally, because if you put too much parameters on, and too many rules, and become too structured, how does anybody find out any new ones beyond the structure? How does anybody learn? Like, when you're experimenting, there's certain stuff you must data. So if you put these two things together, it will blow something up. Do not do that. But everything else, actually, through discovery, we find our ability to test the edges of humanity.
Yep.
And new things. Without that, we will never discover anything else.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Like, there's expectation and excitement around visiting Mars and new forms of technology and this and that and the other, and we're going, that requires people to get things wrong. Like, how many times, like, I know he's an idiot, or in lots of ways a lot of people don't like Elon Musk, but like, they caught a rocket, like literally caught the rocket in those two needles. Anybody remember that when they launched a rocket? But before they got to that point, they had to launch it 5, 6, 7 times where it failed, and it just crashed and burned, literally wasting millions of dollars in order to be able to get that one that the things could catch in the robot arms. And you're going, if we want to have innovation, want to do some cool stuff, we're going to have to embrace failure in that space as well, which is quite a challenge. And tied to that, it's like a segue. We interviewed episode 350, milestone episode, with Chris Loveday. We posed a question: how AI might be for more than just teachers and students in education. And Chris talked about his role in operational intelligence and doing operational work in FE colleges primarily, and how that his work around AI isn't just for teachers and students, is it? I thought that's quite an interesting one. The segue is a little bit loose, but the segue is tied into the fact that innovation has to happen, not just for the people that you think it's immediately going to help in schools and colleges. There's loads of other people that the technology can help in innovation.
I think I talked about it on the podcast. I remember the first time I met Chris, and it was with a gentleman, had done an introduction through learning that I used to work for. Charlie, I cannot remember Charlie's surname. At Peveril. Anyway, head or director of IT. And it said, we've got a new VP, and he wants to explore AI in a context, and this is the challenge, and this is the conversation it was at there. And actually, what the project and where Chris and the team took it was actually nothing to do with the initial conversation. The initial conversation was an aging workforce that they wanted that they could have the money to invest effectively and pay more per se for the work they were doing, but were struggling to fill some of the roles in the demographic and the area that we're having, and how could AI play a part in operationally improving some efficiencies. So that was really boring, and ultimately became the bat and buddy, and it became where they created an AI bot that then was reviewing and did so much operationally around enrollment. So they were taking an AI agent, let's call it, to explain it the best to everybody. And what happened is the AI agent was scanning evidence of results and passport or ID, and saying, yes, this person has the grades and has the right to come on a program. That was nothing to do with the conversation, but it came from exploration and ultimately through conversation of going, what else could it do? What else could it do? That's a great idea. I didn't steer any of those. It was just the ability to then go, well, what else would you want to do? What else do you think it could do based on this? And like I say, I build an AI and I doing all of those kind of things, but it was just a conversation of, I think this would be the opportunity, and let's open our minds to potentially what beyond that. And Chris has done great AI adoption, implementation, as really one of the first people that has probably built a bit of a framework for other people to follow, because an AI framework, really, the DfE won't give it. And I think that's one of the things that people say of, is there a framework to help me guide all of the things around AI rather than just a shiny tool? And I think Chris and the team did it really, really well, Bart, and is now rolling out. And he's written 2 books. I know we've been involved in a review of the second. And yeah, I think it was a really, really good conversation to see how that goes and the art of the possible outside that impacts learner experience for all those co-professionals outside of the classroom.
Yeah, very much so. And I think Chris is a good guy, and he knows the guys from Blazing Squad, which is interesting. But Chris is a good guy. He's done all sorts of cool stuff, and he's continuing in the sector to start doing really important work. And continue doing that work. So that was a great conversation. Go back and listen to that episode 350.
Charlie Davis. Everybody, just to call out before. Charlie Davis is the guy's name. I cannot have forgot Charlie Davis. Doing wonderful work as head or director of IT at Barton Peveril. Really good guy. Really knowledgeable. Didn't want to not call him out because he's doing great stuff as well.
Good man. Episode 351. Now, this was a good one. I'm not saying the others haven't been good, but this was interesting because we talked about pro wrestling, we talked about Shakespeare, we talked about Chicago Bears, we talked about permanent exclusion. This was one that we tried doing it earlier in the day and it didn't work. And I was like, is this not going to happen? And we ended up having to do take 2, and it was a belting conversation. And we called this one Blowing Up the PX, or Permanent Exclusion Pipeline, with Stephen Steinhaus from Solihull AP Multi Academy Trust, episode 351. This was a belter, wasn't it?
He looked aggressive, so I wouldn't mess with him if I were an AP.
Absolutely. He's massive as well. He's really tough.
It's like got banana hands. But like literally like Shakespeare, from wrestling to context, really knowledgeable, and has started a trust of advanced alternate provision in Solihull. Like the intertwine of even just listening to, how the fuck did he get from there to there? Just go listen to it just for that is just absolutely bonkers. Progression in life is definitely not a straight line. I think this conversation, even just from the 10-second overview, demonstrates that, doesn't it?
And he had to finish, because we could have carried on talking for ages. He had to finish because he had to go and play baseball. So Stephen, just for context, is American, but he's doing incredible work in Solihull in the Midlands, and he's in bands and all sorts of stuff as well. Just cool. But the thing that I resonated with the first time I met Stephen, and then the subsequent times I've had conversations with him, and then including his podcast, is his real passion about us dealing with the challenge that permanent exclusion brings to education. Now, I know that people who listen to this, and this is great that we have a broad church in education, and we're not trying to say it's one thing or another. There'll be different opinions and different schools of thought. I know that some people are very clear that they think that permanent exclusion must stay on the table, because if it doesn't, then what about for the more serious challenges in education, assault of teachers, drugs, like what we need to do. But the permanent exclusion pipeline, the amount of people that have been permanently excluded and then have got nowhere else, and education is then failing them that moral responsibility. I love how Stephen is going, right, well, I think if we look at the truth, the statistics around it, what the implication of permanent exclusion means, are we really willing to put that person at a higher risk of X, Y, and Z for what they did? And how do we make sure that education still happens? Because everybody's got that right to education. And Stephen and the team there are doing some great work in that AP, and trying to rethink what it means to do permanent exclusion and to stop it being an epidemic that it's become in the UK at least.
And also just making sure people are aware of the risk and the long-lasting impact of not just that moment in time, but ultimately the effect on that person's life, that person's likelihood in terms of lifespan. I think there was some real data in terms of there, wasn't there, in terms of like the likelihood of all those kind of things, and also the knock-on effect of society. Literally, people, the amount of investment it takes from somebody being excluded to not coming back in, and ultimately what that the cost on society, rather than just being seen as bad kids and get them out. Well, actually, what is the impact for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and the cost per person of those decisions? And it links back to like positive regard stuff, and when adults change, when ultimately, yes, some children will misbehave, and some children will cause havoc at times. But if we just don't have the intention and the care to really try and understand why that is happening, rather than just treat them all as the same as these naughty boys and girls that need to be out of the classroom and out of the school, then we've got a real problem with society, because actually there is some real shit going on, and if we don't take the time to care and bothered, then the long-lasting impact financially and just on society is significant.
Yeah. Yeah, and it does go beyond the scope of the classrooms, doesn't it? Because it is in society, the criminal justice system, health system, social care, X, Y, and Z. So we can kick the can down the road, but as a society, we're picking that up anyway. So you might not have him in your classroom or her in your classroom, but then you're kicking that can down the road. So yeah, and interestingly, that then there is definitely a link then into the next episode that we had, which was with two guests from the US. And that in that one, we were reviewing a book that was called Make School Work. And we asked the question, is youth unemployment a crisis? And it came at a really poignant time, because in the UK, the NEET figures that have been released as part of the Melbourne Review that basically said there's more than 1 million young people not in education, employment, or training, the highest number that we've had for a long, long time, if ever. And the conversation about perhaps there's a reason why youth unemployment is the way it is, and we know that, and we've been saying for ages that perhaps part of the reason why we don't get people into jobs is not just because AI is taking the jobs, but sometimes it's possibly because the jobs are we're not preparing young people for those jobs, or at least the learning is not related and work-based in that space. And we had Alex Levitt and Stephanie Locke in the podcast on that one, episode 352. That was an interesting one, based on the fact that Alex is a workforce futurist, and Stephanie works as VP of Strategic Development at GPS Education Partners in the US.
I've just been speaking about facing away without we're on mute, which is absolutely perfect on a podcast. Thanks for everybody who probably watches back and goes, I think Steve was trying to say something then. I can't remember what it was, but I think it's that conversation of, and I think we pushed and probed of, is education trying to just prepare people for work? How does it intersect and come? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And it links back. I'm just trying to think who was on the podcast when we talked about, I think it might even been peers from Hundo. Like literally.
Okay. I don't know what you're about to say, but go on. I'll tell you if I think it was Piers from Hundo.
When ultimately Piers' ambition and the reason why he got into educate into and doing the work that he did at the time, and I don't even know if Hundo's still a thing, if I'm fair, but the whole thing of how do we get people better out there? How do we get them more noticed? How do we get them better work experience? All those kind of things was from his experience where his parents, and he came from a position of privilege. But he talked about and had a lot of stats of ultimately through work experience and all those kind of things, really people only get real life opportunities depending on their place of their mum and dad or the guardians. And actually, if we make work and engage a little bit better, we can get it for the masses and more learners, rather than just it being a hodgepodge of and basically luck of how many children are actually doing work experience as part of school Well, they're not doing work experience. Basically, no, they couldn't find anything else. So they had another opportunity. So they're in the PD department pumping up fucking footballs. Really, what does that look like, and how do we prepare people so that they are better placed when at some point they will hopefully won't become one of the million young people out of employment or education, and they step into the world of work and they're prepared for it, they understand it, and how does that fit between it, I think is really, really key. And also, how do we link in what is happening in the real world in the work sector compared to, because there is a massive, if you think about the use of AI compared to every single school, not just those ones who've embraced it and are navigating it well, how are we preparing them for a workforce and a role that will absolutely be using AI when we're telling some that they're not allowed it?
Absolutely. And interestingly, that the next episode, which was with Matthew Weems, episode 353, I think it was. Yeah, episode 353. Was focused on that conversation primarily. Most people who know Matthew from the Cambridge School of Bucharest has written a few books around AI for students and for teachers, and I've helped him with supporting some work around his most recent book, AI for Parents, a Parent's Guide to AI. But he has also been developing some tools that help in that conversation around how to prepare people around AI, and some of it was about governance. Is your school breaking the law when it comes to the EU AI Act and deep fakes and some of the challenges that are in that space? But a good chunk of that was based on how we navigate the conversation around preparing young people primarily, and the educators that are working with them, and then parents, to navigate the changes, the disruption that AI is bringing. Because you're right, Steve, when we say about making sure that learning is ready for, and making sure learners learn things that are preparing them for the world of work, AI is absolutely exacerbating the big challenges between those that have it and those that aren't, and the displacement. Like, that's not something we can just ignore. And so how we prepare for humans to thrive and belong in that age of AI is really important. And Matthew helped us explore that. I know you were on that one way, Steve, but I know that it was a strong conversation of two bold blokes trying to explore AI.
Yeah, I just think it's how we in 2026, the middle of 2026. And I know I've just done the shirt and the cat thing, but ultimately, if people talk about what's just happened over the we're doing a review so people know when it is, Ben. These ones are, I'm allowed to say, I guess. But ultimately, how are we in 2026 and 4 years on still talking about whether we should engage in AI into education? How can we still be having that conversation? I'm not for all turn it on and just let everybody use it. That's not what I'm saying. But how are we still thinking if it even fits into education? How the fucking hell is that conversation still happening? I'll be honest. Literally, like, how did we get to it? Because at some point, are we still going to be doing it sitting in 2030 going, do you think we need to do more? Literally, it's only going to accelerate. It's bonkers.
Because there's so many people that are just convinced that the way that we've always done it is okay. And this is the bit that we had a conversation recently on the podcast that's coming out after this, where we're asking the conversation of whether, well, it's always going to take humans. That I'm like, why is it? Do you think, like, one of my good mates is a lorry driver? He said there's no way that AI will be able to do lorry driving. I was like, mate, it's already doing it, just not in our country yet. Oh, it's not safe. It won't be safe. They'll never take our jobs. Have you
seen the Volvo? What year ago did the Volvo 5 truck thing come out? Do you know where the first one is driven by a driver? It's like a flying V. I don't know if anybody's seen the Mighty Ducks.
Yeah.
And basically, the two behind it on either side, so 4 trucks, I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody's got bullshit. No, literally, it already exists. I don't know if it's been used, but I saw. I don't know if it was before generative AI. This is not a generative AI thing. Though these things have already existed. Like, literally, me and the kids had to dodge. I know it's not AI, but me and the kids had to dodge the little Hoover cleaning thing that went round Morrison's the other day, and the kids were just like, "Watch out, Daddy!" And I'm like, I used to like you'd slip over. The reason we noticed it because Ollie dropped
2013, Steve. 2013.
I mean, right, and we're still talking about whether AI as a place in education. The world has moved on. When I was growing up, the only way that you knew whether where your mates were was not through when they dropped a pin. Was a bike spin outside, and literally you'd go somewhere, and you'd be there, and if they weren't, and you'd go. So what happens if you went to the park when you were and your mates weren't there? You just went home. You went to the house, tried to find them. If not, you went home. Isn't that a waste of time? Yeah, but it was a wonderful waste of time, wasn't it? The world is such a different thing, and we can look back in rose-tinted glances all we want about how amazing it was. But the problem is, was it that good? It's like every year when we look back and go, we used to always get snow at Christmas. Did we? Or does just our memory think it was better and we used to get more snow?
True. It's true. It's absolutely true. We definitely have these nostalgic moments, don't we? Thinking it's going to be like that. Yeah. And do you know what? This is not intentional. Everybody must think these guys just plan all this out, because the next episode.
We've never planned anything in our lives, guys. If you've ever been to an event, you'll see it and fucking do. Ben does, and then I just cause chaos.
No. So, to be fair, I caused chaos at the last Uprising event because I was trying to make things happen at the wrong time, and I moved the awards around. I screwed people up. So maybe you're right. Neither of us we try and pretend to organise things, but the next episode does really tie into it. We had a conversation with Andrew Young. Andrew, he's another Crown House publisher with us. Did you hear that, Steve? We're published authors.
I know, mate. I need to change my LinkedIn at some point. I haven't put an author yet. So.
Author, yeah.
Arthur?
Yeah. Arthur,
yeah, I spell it wrong because I can't spell anything right. Somebody was like, Arthur.
O-T-H-U-R.
Otter? An otter? He's an otter? What? Listen to this. We are so shit. Me and Ben only laugh. I'm so glad the kids are here because they'd be like, nobody gets me jokes. There's shit apart from Ben. So this is why it works.
Yeah, it does. It does. But we had that conversation with Andrew Young, who's written a book called Adaptive Teaching. And we gave this the title, episode 354, Is School Actually Worth Getting Out of Bed For? And in the conversation there, he talks very much about how we need to think about teaching. In fact, the best teachers always think about those learners that are in front of them and adapt their learning to do so. And the adaptive has become the new differentiated. It's the word that's used now. But realistically, good teaching and learning has always taken into account the learners that are in front of them, the needs that they've got there, and created resources and learning opportunities based on that. And that's what I think what you were talking about, that road tinted classes. I look at school as something where I did okay at school. In fact, I did really well at school, but nobody thought about what Ben was interested in. The English teacher didn't think, wonder if he's interested in this book. I wonder if we could do something that these young... No. We're doing To Kill a Mockingbird. We're doing Huckleberry Finn. We're doing these because that's what we've always done. And it's a one-size-fits-all. And I don't blame them because I did all right. But I don't know if that's really how we should teach. Do we teach everybody having the same thing? I'm not sure whether that's the right thing to do. And Andrew asked us those questions, didn't he?
I definitely don't look back at my secondary school experience in rose-tinted glasses. Probably remember the moments because I'd want to forget the real shit that it was. And that's not criticism of school and the moment in time and some of the teachers that would just try to do the best. But if that's the best that we had 30 years ago and things haven't improved, I'm dreading my kids going to secondary school, be honest.
But Steve, like let's be honest, the things that you remember that are positive will be like the things you did with your mates, the football teams, the trips, the teachers that did give a shit, the PE lessons that were fun, the maybe even there were some lessons that were, I don't know. But I look back, I went to an old boys school and it was very academic and it was very driven, but we had camaraderie and I had some teachers that really gave a shit and wanted us to thrive. And especially me, I got a scholarship to go to that assisted place to be able to go. So they must have known he's one of them poor kids. They must have done, because I'm not poor kids, but do you know what I mean? Didn't have as much as some of the. I had mates who had tennis courts and swimming pools, and they got a car on their 17th birthday.
Anybody got paddles now? Fancy.
No, maybe I bet they will have paddle courts. I do keep, but yeah, is school actually worth getting out of bed for? Well, it probably is if you care about the people that are in it. And there's some really good teachers, we know that, in every secondary school and every primary school that really do care about kids. But does that mean that the learning, the curriculum, the assessment is worth getting out of bed for? Is it adapted for those kids in front of us? I'm not always sure whether we can do that effectively at scale without using technology effectively, but I don't know. Yeah. So
the last one is Joanna Pavel.
Yeah, Pavel. Yeah, and yeah, great. Another author, right?
Yeah, and I think kind leadership.
Yeah,
and I think ultimately, we spent quite a bit of time delving into the difference between kind and I can't remember what we linked it to, and nice and kind, and ultimately, what does that look like? It's like when you talk about, like we spent time talking about, like vulnerability and different types of leadership and all this. People see it as a weak terminology. And I'm like, and Joanna did a great job and does throughout the book of actually defining and really explaining what the difference is between kind and nice. And actually, kind doesn't mean that you avoid difficult conversations. It doesn't mean that you can't give feedback, but also making sure that down from top level leadership, that kindness actually has an impact on a reframing of, thank you for that, but ultimately, have you done this, and have you given the best opportunities, rather than, I think she linked it to school, didn't she, in regards to some leaders and conversations where some people wanted to move people on that they didn't think were performing, and she said, but that you not doing your job, have you actually, if they're not aware they're not doing a good job and they've not been supported to improve, how do you expect them to be better when you haven't given an opportunity and they're not even aware of it?
Yeah, that was super smart. That was really smart, because and I think it ties back to a book that I know that has really, well, we talked about it in the episode, didn't we? A book that has a massive impact on both of us in terms of radical candor, in terms of clear is kind, and you've got to tell the truth, but you can do that in a way without being a dick. And in fact, actually, just wait there, Steve. I've got something to show you. My friend Philippa. You're on mute, Steve.
Oh, I've just been talking to myself, just holding this up then. So yours says, don't be a dick. Mine says, don't be a prick.
Yeah.
And it's a picture of a cat. Exactly the same. Ultimately, you can make difficult and you have to make difficult decisions. You don't avoid them, you step into them. That doesn't mean that you don't have an understanding of how that will be received and who's on the receiving end and how much harder. I link it back to, ultimately, kindness to one person doesn't mean, or thinking about the big picture, restructures, all those things that happen in different sectors. Being kind to one person doesn't mean that you avoid having a difficult conversation, because the impact could be greater. If you don't change something and avoid it, what does that impact on the learners or other staff or just your team and everything else by avoiding that? And I think so that's really, really true. And Joanna talked about it, obviously, as experiencing it, and I think the ability to apply to really, really good examples is what set out the podcast and also the book.
Yeah, agreed. So on all of these, where there's a book, we massively recommend go and listen to the whole podcast episode, but also go and grab yourself a copy of the book. So Chris has got a new book out called Operational Intelligence. The Alex Levitt and Stephanie Locke book, Make School Work. Matthew's got a new book out about the Parents' Guide to AI with Parents, and Andrew's book, Adaptive Teaching, and then obviously Joanna's there about kind leadership. We don't just interview authors. If you're thinking, oh, they'll never let me on because I've not written a book, that's fine. We let Steve on for ages without having written a book. So
I can't believe it. I can't believe I can actually say it now.
You're an author.
I've used to write books. I've never written a book. And then they're like, oh, I've written a book. Nobody's read it yet, but
they have. Read it. Mate, I went on Amazon earlier and it said there's only 8 left in stock, which means that
Yeah, but
I don't
we
know how
only
many,
put 7
how many
on.
books.
I don't even know how that's possible. We only put 7 available on Amazon. Can somebody give it back? I'm only joking. Just on our book, which is crazy, the amount of friends that I didn't know who have bought the book without even telling me and have been sending me messages that went to my secondary school had been literally ridiculous. And Ben, I'll talk about it offline. But honestly, I was like, what's he bought the book? I'm like, yeah. And literally sent me screenshots of highlighted bits and going, why was this not a thing when we were at school?
That's cool, man. That is so cool. That is so cool.
Yeah.
That is really, really cool. And it's been good, mate. We only aim to do 30 minutes on this, but because I know there was a lot in there, I think it resonates with us, and we enjoy doing these reviews. And if you've got all the way to the end of it, well done. Especially when we're talking about otters and authors and whatever else nonsense. But the reality is, it's good to look back and reflect. And we say this quite a lot in the podcast, that there's too much stuff going on, and we need to have a little bit more time just to sit back and reflect. And that's what we've just been able to do here. So thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast. And wherever you are in the world, if you haven't yet signed up to become part of the Edufuturists Wolfpack, it's not about just getting more numbers and getting people booked in. We are genuinely trying to move the needle, and we want people with us. We want to create a groundswell with individual communities, and we want to get you involved in our planning and our thinking. We're creating some new resources that will be thrown out into that world. But we want this to grow, and it's not just about putting money in an account. It's about putting something back, and we will invest that back in. As be absolutely sure, our plan is to grow this. We've got exciting plans about what we'd like to do if this grows, and we want you to be part of it. So the link is in the show notes to get involved with that. If you've got in before all the founding wolf places have gone, then well done. There might still be some left, but if not, there are still some Wolfpack membership opportunities that you can come and be part of. Yeah, it's been a good one, mate. Thanks for that. Thanks for having the time, and we got time to explore it a little bit.
Yeah. See you soon, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Bye bye.